I'm starting to record and
well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Candace Biffy, and I'm the president and CEO with the Newnan-Coweta Chamber. We are delighted to have Moore Hallmark returning today. I was doing my math earlier, and I believe it was right about 5 months ago when he first joined us, the very beginning of all of this, and was quite helpful. And Moore, I gotta say, our number one go-to resource is the U.S. Chamber. The tools and the resources that you guys have provided are the best anywhere, and just everything that you're doing is spot on, and we appreciate what you do on our behalf, and you save us a lot of money.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad someone uses it. I'll have to be honest, even as an employee of the U.S. Chamber, it's sometimes overwhelming the amount of stuff that we've put out and put together and so forth. And so it's hard to keep up with sometimes, but we're glad you're using it. It's what it's there for, and happy to join you. And, talking about this going back 5 months, probably to the middle of or early March, I guess. It's kind of like our president, Suzanne Clark, recently told somebody, this is almost like March 154. So a day of, and so it's crazy that we're still kind of in this place, but we're here.
Well, I know you have a lot of information to cover today. Susan, do you have any housekeeping details before we just dive right in?
I do not, just the usual. We'll be covering by and large expanded legislation and where things stand to date with that. And, Moore is going to clue us in and give us the dirty and the not so dirty details. If you do have a specific question for Moore as it pertains to this topic, please feel free to use the chat box. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat bubble. Just click on that and go ahead and type in any questions that you might have. And we'll do our best to get them answered. With that said, Moore, take it away.
Well, very good, Susan and Candace. Again, thanks for the opportunity to join you and your members that are on the call today. I tell you, it's been a while since we talked. It's been a while since Congress passed the Phase 3 CARES Act, but it has remained busy and has gotten even busier again over the last couple of weeks. As you may recall, a few weeks ago, the House passed the HEROES Act. It was really strictly along partisan lines. It was a partisan bill. It's a $3.5 trillion bill that was largely a wish list of many on the left of their priorities. Most haven't and didn't take it very serious as a true effort to help those in need during this, who are still struggling through this pandemic. Last week, the Senate introduced the HILS Act. It's a $1 trillion bill that is really their starting line on starting the negotiations between House leadership and the White House. And negotiations, as you've seen, are going slow. In fact, Senator McConnell used the word today, glacier slow. And there's not a lot of give and take. Right now, you've got Secretary Mnuchin and Chief of Staff Mark Meadows leading the negotiation for the White House, and with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. Ironically, Mitch McConnell and the Senate leadership are not included in these negotiations. And the negotiations are particularly going well. As I said, McConnell used the phrase glacier-like, but there's been a lot of deadlines. Obviously the unemployment insurance deadline was July 31st. I think next week is the deadline for businesses to apply for the PPP loans. So Congress is going to renew that. There's also the issue of renewal of rent deferments that's going to be set to expire soon. So there's been a lot of talks and stuff so far, but not a lot of action until most recently. And now that we have action, it's a little bit slow. Candace may recall last Friday night, I sent an email to her and her colleagues around the state of Georgia and around the Southeast region to encourage you to contact Senators Loeffler and Perdue and encourage them to support liability reform legislation in the Hills Act, and as far as the final package, because we were and we still are hearing that the White House is willing to make a deal, almost any deal, and liability protections for businesses and others might go on the chopping block. And so it's very important. That's going to be one of my calls to action at the end of my remarks. But the president has threatened to, and may try to, because of these negotiations are going so poorly and slowly, he may go ahead and sign executive orders to address unemployment insurance, rent deferments, and payroll tax cuts. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes and on Capitol Hill as we speak. I'm on calls daily with our team in Washington, and things are changing by the minute or hours, I guess. But from a chamber standpoint, in working with you here at this chamber and other state and local chambers and the business community alike for the last several months, and over hundreds of meetings that we've hosted with our members talking about the challenges that you're facing and that your businesses are facing regarding reopening and getting the economy going again, we sent a letter a few weeks ago to the president and congressional leaders laying out what we felt were vitally important and must be included in a phase 4 package. Those things included, those 5 priorities included liability protections for unwarranted lawsuits, which I just mentioned a moment ago, support for small and mid-sized businesses and employers, support for childcare and K through 12 schools, unemployment and job training, and then state and local government assistance. Now, I mention these because while we laid them out in our letter, they're also key priorities or provisions in both the House and Senate bills. And so I'm going to kind of talk about those provisions largely and how the 2 bills are different and why they're important to us in the business community. Let me begin first with liability protections. As if the pandemic wasn't devastating enough to our economy, employers are faced with and continue to face uncertainty of possible unwarranted lawsuits filed as it relates to COVID-19 and the threat of their ability to operate and get the economy going again, and recovery is a real problem. The chamber has urged congressional leaders to pass timely, temporary, and targeted liability reform that will provide employers, healthcare providers, nonprofits, educational institutions like universities and others a safe harbor from those type of lawsuits when they make good faith efforts to follow applicable public health guidelines. Now, this is critical, obvious to a wide range of employers, from everyone from the distiller who has switched their production from alcohol to hand sanitizers, to manufacturers who transform their assembly lines from different parts, from automobiles to others, to PPPs and ventilators, to the frontline medical personnel who are treating the afflicted, to essential businesses who never shut their doors from the very beginning, to colleges who are returning to school in the coming days and weeks, and then of course to any businesses that are just now reopening and seeing customers for the first time in months. The House bill did not include any liability protections at all in the bill. The Senate bill did. The Senate bill does protect from COVID-related exposure liability for businesses and schools and nonprofit organizations who followed, safety guidelines that were issued by federal, state, and local authorities. It protects healthcare workers and facilities from medical liability lawsuits. It protects under the PrEP Act manufacturers who started producing personal protective equipment. It provides a safe harbor for independent contractors and labor and employment law protections for COVID-related mitigation efforts by employers, including workplace testing. We're very supportive of the Senate proposals and hope that they can include this in a final package eventually. We've also called on support for small and mid-sized employers. The CARES Act, as you know, did provide a broad swath of support for virtually all industries, but Congress should now provide more targeted relief for industries as well as small and mid-sized businesses who remain fully or partially closed because of social distancing requirements. We've said assistance should include an extension of the Paycheck Protection Program, expansion of the Employee Retention Tax Credit, locally administered aid, and targeted tax provisions. For example, we believe Congress should extend the deadline for applying for the PPP funds through the end of the year and make nonprofit employers eligible to apply for the loans. Obviously, that includes 501c6 organizations, obviously. Congress should make PPP loans forgiveness process easier for the smallest businesses and automatically forgive loans under $150,000 or even $250,000. And those are two figures that are being bannered around on Capitol Hill. Congress, the CARES Act prohibited employers from receiving both PPP loans and employee retention tax credits originally. While no employer should be able to receive a PPP loan and a tax credit for the same expenditures, however, allowing PPP borrowers to access employee retention tax credits after they've exhausted all of their loans would help small businesses who continue to face constraining revenue challenges. We're calling on and encouraging Congress to replenish the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or the EIDL loan program, and require the SBA to remove the $150,000 cap they placed on the program after it was already legislatively drafted that they would have a $2 million cap. And as part of the CARES Act, there were a number of tax provisions that were enacted on a temporary basis to help businesses address liquidity issues. Given the expanded time required to return to a pre-pandemic economy, we believe there are a further extension of those tax provisions is needed. So we're calling on Congress to do that as well. Now, in the House bill, the HEROES Act, they do expand PPP eligibility to all nonprofits, all of them across the board, obviously very beneficial for chambers of commerce. They also expand forgiveness expenses to include PPE, the equipment, and employee protection cost. It includes salaries for, it excludes salaries for federal lobbyists in calculating a paycheck protection loan eligibility expense. This was something the chamber actually helped draft legislation or language for congressional leaders, and truly excluding ourselves, taking us out of the mix on that sense. So there would be no, well, the big bad U.S. chamber is looking for a handout or something. That is not what our intent was. So we were trying to take that off the table. It also provides self-employed tax credit for individuals. Now, the Senate bill did not do that in their bill. Now, the Senate bill does do some similar things. It expands the PPP eligibility for chambers of commerce. They name that in their legislation, that are 501c6s with fewer than 300 employees. Again, this would actually exclude the U.S. Chamber, where we have an organization of about 400 to 450. It expands forgivable expenses for PPEs and more. It authorizes a second round of paycheck protection loans, about $190 billion. The House bill did not do that. It provides a $5,000 tax credit for hiring or rehiring unemployed individuals through the end of this year. The House bill did not. And it also provides tax credits for PPE expenses. The House bill did not. Now, both bills did extend the employee retention tax credit, but at slightly different rates and amounts. In the area of child care and K through 12 schools, as you know, for many parents, a return to work depends largely on whether or not there is whether schools and daycares physically reopen and are available. The House bill does provide $7 billion in child care development block grants and $100 billion for K through 12 education and higher education. The Senate bill actually provided $10 billion for a new back to work child care grant program and provides $5 billion for the existing child care development block grant. It also provided $105 billion for K through 12 education and higher education. We're very supportive of those proposals in the Senate provisions in the Senate bill. Next, with regards to unemployment and job training, Congress needs to support the unemployed while aiding in the return to work. However, we've seen under the current situation, the additional $600 weekly benefit on top of the state benefits, that must be revised because many workers are presently getting more to not work than they were when they were working in the first place. So it causes small businesses to not be able to bring back their employees when they can and want to. We have suggested a middle ground of about 80 to 90% of workers' prior wages and at a maximum of an additional $400 a week or $200 a week for states unable to adjust their computer systems. And then at that point, a gradual phase down of these benefits tied to the unemployment rates. Additionally, Congress should provide funding for states to implement reskilling and job connecting programs to assist those who are likely not to return to their old jobs and to help them find new employment. The House bill does extend the $600 additional weekly payment through January 31st of 2021. In the Senate bill, instead of the $600, they're providing, it provides a fixed amount of $200 through September, and then beginning in October and through the rest of the year, an additional amount that would not exceed $500 when combined with state unemployment insurance already. As I mentioned a moment ago, the state unemployment insurance, or that additional $600 employment check did expire on July the 31st. So this is a major provision and a big point between the House and Senate negotiators at this point. Now, both bills did provide money for job replacement and training assistance. The House bill did provide $2 billion through existing programs, and the Senate bill provides about $1.3 trillion through a combination of new and existing programs. And then lastly, and we support the Senate provisions along this lines as far as the unemployment insurance and the reskilling of workers and so forth. Lastly, state and local governments are experiencing sharp reductions, as you know, in revenue, at the same time facing increased costs to respond to COVID cases and guidelines and so forth as well. What we're doing is we're encouraging Congress to provide timely, targeted, and again, temporary support for state and local governments. However, that is critical that they approach this, their approach to be very fiscally responsible. Now, the House bill provided $450 billion for states for the fiscal years 2020 and 2021. Each state receives an additional $2 billion distributed based on population and unemployment. And it would also provide $375 billion for local governments for fiscal year 2021 as well. And the funds would be distributed based on a modified formula. A lot of the opposition you hear, particularly on the other side in the Senate and from Republicans, is this is a big benefit to a lot of the blue states, the New Yorks, the Californias, to big cities like New York and LA and you know, other Rust Belt states that tend to be blue as well. These are kind of a real sticking point for some of those. The Senate, on the other hand, does expand the date in which states and local governments must use the relief funds already provided in the CARES Act. It allows the CARES Act funds to be used to address revenue shortfalls, but not more than 25% of it could be used for such purposes. Now, we believe that many states and local governments are going to require additional funding beyond what was previously provided in the CARES Act. And additional aid should be provided on a quarterly basis based on actual cost and revenue shortfalls with an overall cap on funding. We don't have the plan on that, but you know, there should be some more restraint in the amounts that you're giving, but state and local governments are going to need some help as well. Now, these are among the priorities that we've kind of laid out a few weeks ago with the administration. They're being addressed and negotiated, and we're talking to congressional leaders and White House officials as well on these priorities and so forth. But as I mentioned at the beginning, I do have a couple of calls to action to you. One is on the liability issue again. As I mentioned a moment ago, we started hearing Friday afternoon that there was a real push and an effort by the White House just to simply make a deal, to get it off the table and be done with it. And the concern that this is only an issue or important to Senator Cornyn, who has drafted legislation, Senate Bill 4317, and Senator Mitch McConnell, who earlier on said drew a red line to saying that liability protections would have to be any part of a Phase 4 bill. We have a real concern that liability reform would be dropped from this as they try to reach a deal. And so what we're encouraging all states and chambers where Republican members are is to contact their offices, encourage them to support Cornyn's bill and the inclusion of liability protections in the final negotiated package. Also, if you can find, and I didn't look it up prior to the call and I apologize, but if you can find President Trump's campaign headquarters here in Georgia and contact their offices and tell them how politically important it is for small businesses, how important it is for small businesses to have this protection, and politically sensitive it is as well, please do that as well. Another one is the $600 insurance, unemployment insurance. Same as before, contact the senator's offices, as well as the president's campaign offices, and tell them how unpopular this is for small businesses as well. How unpopular that is for businesses as they try to recover and get people back to work. Very important there. And then lastly, the 501c6's inclusion. Contact your congressional leaders. Thank them, first of all, for including in both the House and the Senate bills, but stress how critical it is they remain in the final bill. I can't explain why this is, but as early as Monday of this week, we heard Monday that as early as that morning and over the night before on Sunday, keeping the 501c6s or chambers included in a bill is hanging on by a thread. I can't tell you why. There's support on both sides of the aisle for it. But one of the problems and one of the reasons that we're encouraging people to contact their Republican senators on the liability protections, call their senators on how important it is to keep the liability protections in the bill, how important it on the $600 to, revise that. The $600 is just too much and prevents people from going back to work and hurts small businesses. And then to keep the 501c6s in there. Part of the problem that we're having with Republican senators is a lot of them just simply don't even want to pass another bill. It's not that they don't recognize it, but we're talking about $1 trillion in the Senate bill. On the other side, you're talking about more than $3.5 trillion is what the House has proposed. So there's a lot of concern on Capitol Hill, and this is what's adding to the controversy and difficulty in actually getting a bill done, is for Senator Mitch McConnell in the Senate to try to get their bill passed, he has to deal with half his caucus not wanting to pass a bill because of the expense of it all. And then on the other side of the aisle, you have those who want to pass a more liberal spending package that the House Democrats have proposed. So that goes to part of the whole debate and problem that the congressional leaders are having right now, including Mnuchin and Meadows, as they try to negotiate with congressional leaders over this. Going back to the 501c6 inclusion, we're actually hosting a webinar tomorrow. Candace, you guys should have received it already, an announcement about it, but at 2 o'clock tomorrow to give chambers an update on the status and how important it is to reach out to your congressional delegations, because this is going to be a tough deal as we go through the next several days and potentially weeks until Congress actually comes up with a final deal on this bill. So with that, I've probably talked more than you wanted to. I've probably overwhelmed you with a lot of information, but I'm happy to stop there and take any questions you have and try to answer those. And Susan, if I can't, you get to answer all the tough ones, okay?
No, passing the buck, my friend. That's
all
why
right.
we're here. We actually don't have many questions here. In fact, the one pressing one was, will we get this information after we're done with this session? So I think it's a lot of information for people to wrap their heads around, and you're probably going to have some repeat watchers. But that being said, while Moore was talking, I was absolutely listening. but also looking this information up on the U.S. Chamber site so that I could easily send your letter to the members who are on this call today and to our other members so that they can recap on this and take those actions.
Yeah. Did you find it okay, Susan, or do you want me to forward it to you?
Oh yeah, I might as well have built this website myself. I'm so familiar with it at this point, so I know the nooks and crannies.
Well,
so yep.
The letter has got the what our priorities are and why, and we lay out tons of information about it. But there's also a link to our side-by-side comparison between the House and Senate bills and our recommendations. So make sure you include that as well.
I do have it. I've already pulled it up because I wanted to follow along with you, and I think people would find that helpful. So yeah, we will send out those 2 links. Another question that I know that I've been asked, and it's come as a result of a lot of our task force meetings and something that I've heard from just members and community folks in general, is, as you know, the unemployment insurance is a very hot topic on many fronts. But what is happening right now? It officially came to an end. What is the status of it while we are anticipating additional legislation?
And start the first part of your question again.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Regarding the unemployment benefits and the expansion that was put in place per the CARES Act, since that has expired, so to speak, where does it stand right now? Are employers still to be filing partial claims? Is it just at a standstill?
I would say it's simply at a standstill. There was, and again, part of the problem is, it goes to what I was saying a minute ago about Republicans saying this is too big of a package, too much money. There's still money left over from the CARES Act already. Let's utilize those that were already authorized and appropriated. We want to continue to provide unemployment insurance to everybody, throughout the rest of the year and through January of next year. So you have both sides. So at this point, it's a standstill. Without an extension, without a temporary extension. In fact, some proposed a temporary extension for another week or 2. That came from senators on the Republican side, and the Democrats turned it down. Now, of course, both are pointing fingers at one another, saying that it's all political. And keep in mind, we're about 95 days away from an election. And so both sides are kind of digging their heels into, what they feel like they can get. And I think a lot of people feel like the House bill, there are some good things. And by the way, I don't want to discourage it entirely, but there are things that we do like in there. But there are things that we like in the Senate bill as well. And there's areas in which both need to come together and compromise on some things. But
hey, Moore, let me ask you a question before in relation to that topic. And I get it, it's political, but I've never understood why in a pandemic like this, both sides want to build other stuff in that's not related to the pandemic. The most recent example being the grandiose FBI building, but there's lots of examples. Why is that? And why can't they just focus on the pandemic?
Listen, Candace, you hit the nail on the head. It's a question that we all ask as sensible people. They're just not sensible sometimes. And I don't say that. I'd say that jokingly, of course, but my point is they just look at it as, okay, well, this is going to help them, but while we're doing it, let's help these out and let's do this. And we've got this pet project. And then they start negotiating, and then they're like, well, then they have fractions within, both parties have their own fractions. The Democrats have the far left who are making their demands of things. They want green energy development, and they want support and money for the Green New Deal. And then Republicans are saying that's too expensive and I'm not going to vote for it because there's too much money there. But then the middle of both sides are having to say, well, what can get you to vote for this, because we can't pass it without your support. And so then they start, well, we'll add these things in to help you get to a yes vote, and we'll take these things out to get you to a yes vote. And so it's just part of the making of sausage, I guess. And it's, I can remember, I think it was Johnny Eisenhower or someone said, you could take most pieces of legislation and make them 2 or 3 pages long if you just made them very simple. But, simple issues get turned into big, massive pages of legislation that often will include things that don't have anything to do with the legislation that you're dealing with. And again, it's just part of the negotiation of trying to get enough support to pass it through one chamber and through one party a lot of times.
So I see your buddy Trey laughing over there. Y'all have been friends for years. I know that. But so a follow-up question.
Now, who, Trey Ragsdale?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
So do you ever see in this environment, and this is your personal opinion, are politicians getting back to country first, constituent second, good values and morals and et cetera third, and then party way down the line? You ever have those discussions at the U.S. Chamber?
No, we really don't. But I would say it's almost the inverse. I mean, right now, again, there's just a lot of posturing on both sides of the aisle right now, and you know, both the far bases of both parties are minorities of the two parties, but they're large enough minorities to prevent good things going through. And so they do determine and make a lot of the decisions that the majority of the party will have to deal with to garner their support on issues and so forth. So it's a lot of party politics right now because of the elections. There is a desire to help those in need. And then there's the question of how much do we do? And then there's also the question, this kind of goes to the point of 501c6s. If you recall or have heard, in the beginning, they were left out largely of the PPP loans because of the misconception or misunderstanding that some organizations that were filing as 501c6 organizations didn't qualify or didn't need it, and that being like the NFL. Well, the NFL isn't a 501c6 organization, but somewhere or another along the lines, several members of Congress thought they were. And so they started looking at organizations and, well, we're not going to do that because you've got organizations like the NBA and NFL and others who don't need the money and stuff. And so it's taken a lot for us to encourage or to educate a lot of these members about, no, chambers of commerce are small businesses in essence, and they are economic developers in their communities, and they're helping businesses stay afloat during this time. And so we've gotten enough support. It's just a matter of, again, it's the jockeying. Well, if chambers get to be included in the expansion of the PPP loan, what about this organization and this level of tax deferred and stuff? And so there's just a lot of back and forth that kind of goes on with some of this process. I wish it was easy. Goodness gracious, I'm on calls every day with our lobbying shop and senior folks in headquarters talking about what members are targets, what we need to talk to them about, and what they're saying. And it would make it a whole lot easier if they just kind of looked at the good of what's kind of going on with the country and the economy and trying to get people back to work. But there's also, going to the point of what I said a minute ago, a lot of local and state governments are going to need some more additional financial support as well. And we recognize that. And we think they need it and are going to need and deserve it as well. They're part of the economy rebuilding as well.
Thank you. That was really good information. It's amazing what you know that's all contained right here. And Susan, I was sitting here thinking, we just need somebody that can do a transcript of Moore's comments. You know, there is that application that will do that for you. Perhaps we'll do that. And
oh my Lord.
Just read.
I'm not sure what it might come out to read like. And if Trey's on the call, he could have answered that just as well, if not better.
I probably see Trey 2 or 3 times a week on different calls. He cleaned up for you today.
Oh, good.
There is the chat box if anybody wants to type a question.
We do have one that I'd like to ask really quickly. I'm processing it in my mind, but I think Moore might have easier, quicker access to the answer. The unemployment benefit, the additional $600. I'm pretty sure I know this answer. Once an individual's unemployment benefits end, the whatever proposed or theoretic additional will also terminate. But what's going to happen with the 14 to 20 weeks eligibility? Because a lot of people have already reached that. Is that part of the negotiation, Moore?
I have not heard that that's part of, and even our summary of the two bills, I have not seen any additional for state unemployment insurance. They're talking really only about the federal additional assistance is what they're talking about.
Okay, so that's going to have to be something that happens within the state of Georgia and all others respectively.
Right, I think so.
Okay.
But again, it may be part of some of that assistance, additional dollars for state and local governments with that additional funding to assist them in various capacities. And that may be part of the capacities we're talking about.
Okay, so Stephanie, to completely answer your question, we'll educate ourselves on that a little bit and find out what's happening in the state of Georgia and be able to kind of help you navigate completely answering that question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I don't know if it's appropriate to talk or not, but I really had the question because, I hear our small businesses talking about, not being able to tap into the workforce anymore because, yes, people are saying, I would rather stay home and receive this benefit than to try to go to work and, compounded with everything else that they're probably thinking about because these individuals are your individuals who have children who may be low income already, who are suffering with what we're probably about to see with schools going virtually and things of that nature. So I guess the thought is it's going to end. And that is my thought. It's going to end 14 to 20 weeks. It's going to end for that individual and they will eventually have to figure out something. So, I hear people talking about that impact, but I'm like, it ends. It will eventually end and you guys will be able to tap back into that workforce because people can only file for unemployment so many times. You only have a certain base wage for a period of time. So it does eventually end. So the group of people that we're seeing now are these initial claims, which have taken a downturn in the last month or so. So I don't know if I'm, for or against. I hear the arguments. I do know that it ends. And I work in workforce with job training. Moore, we received part of the additional money that Georgia received, $12 million for job training and things of that nature. And we're having a hard time recruiting people for it. I see one of my board members on, Donna Lackey, like we've talked to them about, our efforts to make this work, but people are receiving unemployment. And they're like, why am I going to go into work experience or job training when I can do this? And so we'll talk later. So we have to put them on the list. We'll call you back in 14 to 20 weeks because you have no choice. You've got to do something with your life.
That's a good point. And no, you should speak up. And I'm glad you did. And you're exactly right. We've heard from employers and chamber execs who've heard from their members who have said, we've come back on full line and we now can't bring our 10 employees or our 20 employees. And it's really impacted a lot of the restaurant industries and others like that do have a lot of hourly workers and they just can't bring those people back. And when they're competing with the federal government, giving them $600 on top of what they were already getting or what they would qualify for under state unemployment. And so it's a real challenge. There does still need to be assistance for the unemployed. We aren't, and I don't think either the Republicans or Democrats, the House and senators are saying there doesn't need to be some sort of assistance because this pandemic and these challenges are going to go far beyond these initial first few months and deadlines that they set up. It's just a matter of finding a middle ground that doesn't incentivize people to stay home. It incentivizes them to go back to work, and there's a temporary bridge to help get them to do so while they look for a job and or are retrained in a new job that they're brand new to and stuff.
Sure.
Excellent. Stephanie, thank you so much for speaking up and asking that question. And Moore, of course, thank you so much for answering it. Any other questions? Candace, anything else on your end before we let Moore move on to the rest of his day?
No, just that I know that we'll be getting this recording out to folks as well as additional collateral that you'll be pulling together. And Moore, we appreciate you and I'm sure we'll have you back. And
happy to anytime.
At this point, we just need to follow through on the call to action and say lots of prayers.
Do call those senators and call your House delegations on the 501c folks. This is a real critical time. And so don't take anything for granted. Make those calls and tell them to support the liability protections of the final package, fix the $600 unemployment insurance provision, and then thank them for the 501c6s and keep it in the final package as well.
Excellent.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Well, that concludes today's Back to Business info session. We appreciate everybody who dialed in to join us. And once again, just look for this to follow by way of email. You'll get the recording and the supporting documentation. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.